In the image below, you will see a snail. There's his shell, there's his eyes. He also has a beret and baguettes flying out the back of his car with an S painted on it. He's clearly driving very fast, as you can see by the lines of motion coming out from under the tires. One might even say, look at that S car go. That's a joke for anybody whose sense of humor is as bad as mine. The rest of us, we're going to talk about shutter speed. Shutter speed, what is it? Shutter speed is the amount of time it takes when you click the button on your camera for the shutter to open, for information to be received by the sensor or film behind the shutter, and then for it to close again. So it's time, right? Shutter speed is related to 1 second, because unless you're from a different planet or you're a person that just doesn't count in seconds, like seconds, minutes, days, weeks, hours, so on and so forth, that was out of order, but whatever. Unless you don't count by seconds, this is what it's related to. Anything less than 1 second is going to be delivered to you visually as a fraction, right? So 1/50, 1/100, 1/200, that's 1/200th of a second, right? That's the amount of time that the shutter is opening and closing again. Anything more than a second is usually a whole number or whole number with a decimal. So 1, 2, 2.5, 3, 5, 10, so on and so forth, going up, right? So what does shutter speed control? Shutter speed controls the amount of light reaching the sensor as well as the amount of motion that's occurring in the image, right? So let's talk about the light first. When you think about a horror movie, when I think about a horror movie, I think about the scenes where it's dark, the main character is walking through somewhere and there's a flash of light and you see just a glimpse of the creature, right? That quick moment is all the information you get of what you're looking at. It's the same thing with the shutter speed, right? It opens and closes again, and that's all the information it gets about whatever the sensor or the film is pointed at. The less time you have where the shutter is open, the less time there is for light to reach the sensor. The more time you have where the shutter is open, the more time there is for light to reach the sensor. So less time equals a darker image, more time equals a brighter image. The other part of this to think about is shutter speed when we talk about motion, right? So motion is a relative term because something that moves fast compared to something that moves slow travel at different speeds, right? So when we talk about, like, for example, the snail in the car, S car go. If you're looking at a car, it's traveling fast compared to you who's walking, right? But if you look at a car compared to a jet, the car is now going slow. So when we talk about shutter speed, we think about relationship to the thing we're shooting. If you want to shoot something and get the motion to stop, right? To have a crystal clear image where there's no motion in it, you have to have your shutter speed faster than whatever it is you're photographing. If you want to add motion to your images, you need to have your shutter speed close to or slower than whatever it is you're photographing. Let's take a look at some examples real fast. So in this first image, what we have is we have a motorcyclist who's coming head on at the camera, right? If you look at the ground, there's not a lot of motion in the ground, there's not a lot of motion in the rider, and there's not a lot of motion in the tire, which means that this image is shot where the shutter speed is going a little bit faster than, or about as fast as, the motorcyclist's tires as they're driving. Because anything moving faster than the shutter speed is going to create motion blur. Anything moving slower is going to create a still image, right? So the ground, the tire is pretty close. There's a little bit of blur in the tire. And then the person don't have a whole lot of motion in them, which means we're shot pretty close to the speed that this object was traveling, right? Now we look at this next image. So let's take a look at this second rider. So this rider is framed in the center of the image, and the camera's motion and the rider's motion are roughly the same speed, because I was in a car photographing out the window at the same speed that this bike was traveling, which is why the bike is still, right? Now we look at the tires and the spokes and the ground underneath this person, and they're traveling through the image from the right to the left, and then the tires are spinning. So we see the spokes are blurred out. You can't see the treads anymore because it's moving faster than the camera's shutter speed. And then the ground is also moving faster than the camera's shutter speed, which is why it's all blurred out. Now, I talked earlier about selective kind of use of motion, right? So when we look at this image, this is from DCI semifinals this year, we see a color guard member where their face is clear and their torso is clear, but their arms and their equipment are blurry. So what happened in this image is when it was taken, the shutter speed is faster than the speed that the head and body are moving, but slower than the speed the flag and the arms are moving, right? That's why there's a little bit of motion blur happening there. Another example from this year, and we see this guard member, the image is shot faster than the equipment can move. So we have a crystal clear image of the flag, of the arms, of the hands, and of the silk rippling through the air, because there's not room for motion to happen. The shutter speed is happening so quick. It's so open close that there's no room for motion to get in. We're moving that much faster than the subject we're shooting. So let's recap. A faster shutter speed allows less light to reach the sensor, but also reduces motion in the image. Slower shutter speed, or a longer exposure time increases the amount of light reaching the sensor, and allows for more motion in your image. Reminder that motion is relative to whatever we're looking at, and that if you're shooting something and you want to freeze the image, you need to photograph faster than whatever it is moving. If you want to allow motion, you just shoot at about the same pace. And if you want to increase the amount of motion, you just shoot slower than whatever is happening in the image. Like aperture and ISO, what settings you use and when you use them will give you different results. But hopefully this video has helped you understand shutter speed and how to use it to your advantage to create the images you want. Remember, respect your gear, your spot, your subject, and most importantly, yourself. Love you guys. Take care.